welcome to Ludonarrative Dissidents. This is episode 8, and we're going to be talking about 1,000-Year-Old Vampire by Tim Hutchings. It is a solo journal role-playing game. We've discussed quite a variety of role-playing games in this series so far, and this might be the most unusual one in terms of in a lot of things, but I don't know. And with me, as always, is Greg Stolze and James Wallace.
Hey.
I think we've all had at least one vampire saga to talk about, but this game started a trend of solo journaling role-playing games on crowdfunding websites that I've seen and on itch.io and other sites. So to give a brief summary of it, 1,000-Year-Old Vampire is a solo journaling role-playing game where you are given a series of prompts to describe what happens to your vampire, who they are before they become a vampire, what happens to them, and what their ultimate fate is, I should say. That is best played with some sort of way to write down your responses. It takes too long to simply remember or think about it.
Trying to play 1,000-Year-Old Vampire in your head is probably the closest experience most of us will ever have to what 1,000-Year-Old Vampire actually is, because it is a game of bloodletting and forgetting. You have
Is that original? That's very good.
Yeah, I came up with that just off the dome. Usually I have to edit to get something that good, but now and again it just slips out.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about the Greg? Do you want to explain the basic?
All right. What's it do? It's a roll and write game where you create the story of an innate victimizer, and this is something that shows up in any vampire game to some extent, or I think if it's done well, it shows up, which is that you as a vampire are in moral checkmate. Your existence is morally wrong. You cannot exist without victimizing someone in some way. And so that's very baked into this. And so it procedurally generates long-term loss and moral struggle. The way that it does this is you start out with a number of memories, each of which can hold 3 experiences. So you have 5 memories. So ultimately, you can only remember 15 things about your life without having recourse to diaries, where you write stuff down. But then once you write it down, it's out of your head. And if something happens to the diary, you can't recover it. Mm-hmm. The core loop is hope for gain, decide what you lose. Because after you roll a D10 and a D6, you deduct the D6 from the D10, and you're sort of moving through the book like it's a game board. And you take 3 steps forward or 2 steps back, or you stay on the same slot you're on. And each page that you land on has a writing prompt. And if you get to the same page a second time, then there's a second layer to it and a third layer. And if you get all 3 layers of a page, then you just move on to the next page. So generally, the way the rules are set up, you have to move forward, but with some backsliding. Your aggregate long-term movement will be forward through the book until you hit a prompt that says, your story's over now. Describe how it ends. With each roll, you're supposed to write down an experience. There are a few exceptions where it's like, your memories just fade out. Go back and find an experience and strike out the first 3 nouns in it. They're just gone. Don't write down an experience for this. You're just falling apart. So it is a game, I would call it a game of soul and identity triage, because you're always trying to decide, okay, which memory do I keep? And when I play it, I tend to try and hang on really hard to the first memory, which is always, I am so-and-so from thus and such place. Let me pull up. Do not play this on... I tried playing it with pen and paper. And boy, that'll give you a hand cramp, and it'll be hard to read because you're scratching everything out and recopying it. So, one is like, my name is Sufyan, son of Brahim. I was born in the city of Algiers in the year 1101. Like my father, I am a builder. And I tried to hold on to that memory, but I was forced to strike it out. Another game I had, I am Ermengarde, the daughter of a silversmith working in the Holy Roman Empire. And again, I lost the whole memory, I don't remember avoiding a meddlesome priest, encountering this African immortal that flies by night as a fireball after shedding her skin. It's all gone. So it's a fun game. And when we get into how it works, I'll cover that a little bit. I do have to say, while I liked it a lot, it uses the future tense, and I know I've complained about this before, and I know that all of you readers and James and Ross could probably do this rant from memory by now, but please, come on, people. This was like finding a beautiful cherry apple red Thunderbird in the driveway with a full tank of gas in pristine condition, and you get behind the wheel and the radio won't go off and it's trapped on adult contemporary. It makes me crazy. It makes me suffer. Please just check your texts for will and apostrophe LL. I am begging you with tears in my eyes. So with that out of the way, yeah, let's move on to James while I compose myself.
It's I have a similar rant, but which we will come to. It's really interesting. I hadn't really come across it before. Ross, you mentioned the how influential it's been. This is a game that I think only came out last year. I think it came out in 2020.
No, the 2019.
2019. Okay.
Yeah.
In that case, there's an incorrect copyright date on something.
Dun, dun, dun.
But still, in 2 years, it's been amazingly influential. The whole idea of journaling games and games where you write down what's going on rather than there being a GM or anything like that. I mean, games like Amber back in the early 90s encouraged players to write character diaries and character fiction and stuff like that. Then there was De Profundis, which I had a small hand. I published the English edition, which is an epistolatory game in which players exchange letters discussing what they're doing. And then just, I think 4 or 5 years ago, there was The Beast, which came out of Scandinavia, which is a card-based journaling game about having sex with a monster, which we shortlisted for the Diana Jones Award. I say we, I was running the award at the time. Those are the big kind of stepping stones that I'm aware of in that. But this has been so influential. There are so many games which clearly owe a debt to the ideas in here in such a short space of time. And it's interesting looking at its own debts. Obviously, if you can't talk about role-playing games of vampires without talking about Vampire the Masquerade. But I think it goes back further than that. I think obviously there's a huge debt to Anne Rice, the Interview with the Vampire, the concepts that come out of that, the vampire being something that persists through time, which Rice was not the first to do that, but she was the one to popularize it. And really bring that kind of to the forefront to the vampire narrative. But also Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks's 2,000-year-old man. I think that's in there as well. But what this brings in as well is the idea of forgetting. And that's, for me, the heart of this is what makes the system really interesting. This idea that your memories do not persist. You're not building a story. You are trying to hold on to bits of it. And way back at the start of this, one of the very early episodes we did, I talked about a game that I was trying to redevelop, Creeks and Crawdads from the early days of indie games, in which you play a mutated post-apocalypse crawdad in which you have 5 memory slots. And you know, when you want to remember something new, you have to cross out one of your existing memories. This is that game writ large and brilliant. The whole mechanic of trying, you exist in this bubble of time, moving through the centuries, trying to hold on to a sense of identity, trying to not to devolve into just this monstrous being that, as Greg says, exists only to devour. That's I mean, in terms of the core of a game, I read so many role-playing games, and there's nothing really at its core other than kill some, get experience points, have a good time. This is such a strong idea, such a strong theme. It's really powerful.
One of as I was thinking about, I'm, looking at the game, contemplating it, I compared it to Bluebeard's Bride, and I'm like, okay, so Bluebeard's Bride is the game about isolation that you play with your friends, whereas 1,000-Year-Old Vampire is the game about isolation that you play by yourself. So there are some similar themes. It's like, you're cut off. Society isn't there for you, isn't going to help you. It's actively antagonistic towards you most of the time. But at least in Bluebeard's Bride, you have other facets of your personality who are, at least for most of the game, pulling in traces with you. Whereas here, it's just like, oh no, you'll have allies, but they'll eventually betray you, or you'll eventually betray them, or they'll be dead soon. And when you're a vampire dealing with mortals, everyone you meet is someone who's going to be dead soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's pretty sad. It's got a heavy emo gothic angle to it, as you might expect from a game about vampires.
Yes. There are some interviews in the back of the book, and in the first interview, the interviewer Briar Sheldon calls them 1,000-Year Vampire and games like it lonely games, and I think that's a very apt description of this. It is a lonely game. You play by yourself when you're alone, and it is about a lonely person wandering through the ages.
And can I just jump in at that point and say the idea of an analog game, a physical game that you play on your own is kind of an aberration. There's solitaire card games and there are puzzles and things like that, but the idea of a game that you play on your own is really unusual until you come to computer games, where that's been the norm for essentially almost the entire duration of the history of computer games. So it's an interesting thing of kind of, I don't think you could do a digital version of this. I mean, yes, you could digitize the prompts. I don't think it would be the same experience at all. I think the way you interact with the book is very different to the way you interact with on-screen prompts, even if you're reading a PDF. But I just wanted to mention those two traditions of gaming are, lonely games are not a complete aberration, because it is the way that most people play games these days. It's just those are video games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the author Tim Hutchings also does mention in the interview, I think the same one, the analog thing that he was thinking of, which were like war games tabletop war games that were played as solo games, and he described them more as elaborate puzzles to solve, like a lot of the Avalon Hill titles and for me, I remember there are not only choose your own adventure novels, but there's also like Lone Wolf, where you actually had an RPG character and you kept track of your stats. And there was a series of novels that you could advance your character through and carry items over from one adventure to the next. And it's always, the idea has always been there, but I think this is, they take a lot of the things that they reduce a lot of the bookkeeping and a lot of the extraneous elements and really distill, like 1,000-Year Vampire works because in a sense, you really get playing really quickly. You get to the role playing immediately because it's about the character, figuring out who this person is and what they do in these circumstances, and it removes almost everything else. There is a bit of resource management.
I would say resource management is central. Yeah. That was my instinct. That was my insight about how it does what it does. But yeah, what it does is that it puts you in the shoes of this predator that lasts longer than he should. And it really is, I mean, it kind of gives you insight into the idea of the vampire as a fundamentally useless thing, right? Mm-hmm. The vampire contributes nothing to anybody by and large. It just takes, it has no place in the natural world. Time passes it by. It is not equipped to change, grow, but only to kind of survive on the margins through cunning and ruthlessness.
Yeah.
So that's some stark shit.
Yeah, it is. And in terms of what it does, we already mentioned some of the attributes in the game, the experiences and memories, but the game does formalize other resources or traits, as they call them. So we already mentioned memories, but you also have skills, resources, characters, and marks. Skills are brief descriptions of a thing your character can do. Resources are possessions, assets. They can be small, they can be large. Characters are people your vampire knows. And then marks are physical marks of some kind, something that has scarred your character, something that sets them apart. Yeah.
Because we all played this, do you guys have your 1,000-year-old vampire records out? Do you remember these? Because
yeah.
All right, what were the marks of your vampire?
So by the end, my vampire, who began life as a exiled samurai working in New Spain, i.e. Mexico, in 1615, when a Catholic priest introduced him to a demon, and he made a deal and gained immortality for eternal thirst. So his marks were a black claw mark over my heart, where Stolas the demon burned his brand on me.
Sweet.
Second one was ashen gray skin and black veins. I can use makeup to conceal the veins, but I always look pale and unwell. 3, a scar across my throat from dueling another vampire. I wear scarves now. And then 4th, owl-like eyes. Tinted glasses a must.
I just have the one. Simply, my neck is a bloody ruin of scar tissue.
Wow.
And that comes from the origin, basically, of where he was a blood bag for. He was a Norman peasant. I skimmed through a lot of this. I deliberately didn't write this down in great depth.
Oh man, you're missing out.
I probably am. I have a weird attitude to writing, which I may come on to later, which has coloured my attitude to the game generally. I don't tell stories for myself. I tell stories for other people. And that's kind of been because since I was a teenager, I've written for on commission for money. Almost always. The concept of writing for pleasure is almost alien to me. I enjoy what I write, and I enjoy the process of writing purely for pleasure. It's not something I do. But my character was a Saxon peasant in East Anglia, the area of the UK where I'm from originally, in the year born in around 1040. Had been caught up in the Norman conquest, had been basically became a blood bag for a newly arrived Norman noble who was also a vampire, who got very, very drunk, accidentally turned him into a vampire, and he made his escape at that point. But the scars from that remain.
All right. Yeah, the marks I came up with were cloaked in mist and shadow, grotesquely burned left hand, moves by lunging and skulking, and hair trails off into fog. So this is Ermengarde, the silversmith's daughter, who, let's see, how did she even get turned? I got to read the grayed out text where it was scratched out. Oh yeah, just the figure from the fog came to me while I was hiding from the guy my dad wanted me to marry, and I like skulked away after making myself sick with forbidden herbology, and then this thing swooped in out of the night, came to me by night, and that's the start of 1,000 years of avoiding the notice of men and bending mere mortals to my will. Are we moving on to how it works? I mean, because what it does is it produces this text, and it's this broken text of a broken being that most of the people who mean anything to it are going to be dead by the end of the game and possibly just forgotten. And
yes.
Not
every character is going to have anything like a major part. Some characters appear, even some of the characters from your beginning, from your origin, will not last and will not be of any significance to the story, whether you're taking that as the whole of the story or the bits that the character remembers of the story.
Yes.
This is not a complete and intricate narrative generator. It is a narrative generator, but it is not one that takes pains to tie up all the plot threads.
Yeah, it will not be a perfectly formed mechanistic tidy story. You'll have a messy story with loads of loose ends that may end abruptly.
It is, but it's quite a human story, if I can put it that way, in the sense that it has that reality to it.
So as an example, my character fell in love with a mortal, and then in the very next prompt it says, "You fell asleep for a century." So it's like, well, that's a kick in the pants. A lot of this is what the game becomes about is you do gain resources and skills and various things, and some prompts, but more prompts pretty much every prompt requires you to give up something, like a memory for an experience. You have to check skills. Once a skill is checked, you cannot use it again. Usually, if you use a resource once, it's gone. And if you're asked to check a skill and you can't check a skill, you have to use a resource. If you have no skills or resources, your character is done. There's also a certain number of prompts totally in the game, and the prompts at the very end all just end your story. The game is over. So no matter how well, quote unquote, you do, your story will come to an end if you keep playing, which is kind of the point. The game becomes a lot about dealing with new circumstances and adapting and just dealing like it's a triage of emotions and memories in life. Like, what can I give up to get past this challenge? What can I give up to deal with this crisis? How do I adapt to what's happening around me? Because your vampire, no matter what you start them out as, will go through a lot of changes. They'll go to a lot of different places. They'll meet different people, and they'll have a very they'll wind up in completely different circumstances. At least in my experience playing it. Also, I should mention there is an illustrated playthrough that we'll put in the show notes that is quite beautiful. That is actually getting published as its own sort of lithograph that shows one example of it from a artist from Old Dog Games. But yeah,
and I think that was the first thing I ever saw related to 1,000-Year-Old Vampire. So good job on him on selling it. Yeah,
like the vampire starts in this illustrated playthrough as a son of a fisherman in Denmark and winds up on a whaling ship in like the 19th century or the 20th century in the Arctic, or fishing ship in the Arctic in the 20th century. So like,
it really didn't move that far. Starts on a boat, ends on a boat.
Well, kind of. Yeah.
I mean, the game I played incorrectly, where I didn't realize I would die if I ran out of skills and resources. You know, it's like, started out as a Mediterranean fisherman, wound up in the 20th century hunting Nazis through Central America because, people hate those guys. No one cares when they die. And ends up as a California cult deprogrammer / grifter based around this conspiracy theory founded on the Klugia archive, which was all basically created to hunt me. So, like I say, it's fun. But, okay, so the way it works and the way part of why it's so compelling, I'm like, this is so emotionally heated and gothic, but at heart, it's a resource management game. You have this very limited set of things you can use, and you usually lose them by using them. So you have to choose what memory you're gonna scratch out in order to write a new one in. And it's like, okay, I got to keep the memories with all the other weird immortals because they're more likely to show up and mess with me. But, you can try and be strategic about it and then get a prompt. It's just like, scratch out a whole memory. Bye-bye. And so the other thing that I think makes this very compelling is that it has sort of a gambling feel to it. As you're playing it, you'll be like, you'll have been rolling and rolling and rolling. You'll be like, but just one more. I just want to see what happens if what the next prompt is, because it gives you kind of this 1-2 reward, and the consistent reward. And we can get into BF Skinner here if you guys like. The idea that the conditioning schedule that works the best is intermittent reward, right? Or start off with consistent reward, but then switch to intermittent reward, which this game does. I remember someone who explained to me that the reason Magic the Gathering was so popular at the beginning is like, oh yeah, at the beginning it's persistent reward. Every booster pack you buy has some cool new card you've never seen before. But then, as you go on, it switches to intermittent reward because you start opening booster packs and you're like, I've seen all these, I want the Cherry Rush back. So with 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, every prompt gives you the persistent reward of, oh, I get to push the story forward and I get to see what happens next. And that's fun and that's entertaining, and it makes the creative bits of your brain sit up and take notice. But it's also the intermittent reward of, oh, am I going to get a skill? I'm really running low on skills. I could really use a prompt that lets me take another one. I hope I get a resource, or I hope this cool character shows up again, or I hope I have an excuse to, kill off this guy. And so you're like someone at the casino pulling the lever on the one-armed bandit. You're going, just one more. Okay, just one more after this. That one didn't count. And so I think that's part of what this game does so well, and what makes it compelling is that aspect, that reward, that intermittent reward loop.
Yeah. I would certainly agree with that. Certainly when I was playing, I did feel like, all right, I can keep playing a little bit longer. I can see what happens to this poor guy. Because some of them do reward you. They're not all bad. I mean, in terms of like resources. So yeah.
And even in terms of plot, it can be, you find the descendant of someone you victimized. How do you try and help them in order to make up for your past indiscretions? Mm-hmm. You'll get prompts like that. And so you get chances to try and offset your monstrosity.
But it's, the way the dice mechanic works, just to go back to that, let's roll a d10 and a d6 and subtract the 6 from the 10. So the overall trend, the general trend is forward, but occasionally you will go backwards, and sometimes you'll go backwards several times, and you'll run into prompts that you've already been to, and you have to go to the second stage and the third stage of that. But yes, wanting to go further into the book and wanting to progress and see how it goes, and as you say, you start getting these callbacks, and callbacks are enormously powerful in storytelling. This reference to things where you've already been, whether you remember them or not, as the character. That all works really nicely. My big nitpick, if I can go into my big nitpick, is the way the game starts. And first of all, I think it's excusable. You can say the game is very much for people who already understand what role-playing is, what storytelling is. They understand how to do it, and they enjoy doing it. It is a game for those people, because character generation is actually incredibly bare bones and assumes that you are already a storyteller, because I think character generation itself is like 2 pages, and it says, okay, come up with a character, have a concept for a character. Okay, now you need 3 mortals that you've got connections to, and experiences for, and then items, and then you need to come up with memories that connect those items to those characters, and these all need to be significant. And it's actually quite hard work. Essentially, you are being asked to do some fairly advanced storytelling. This is not introductory level stuff. That's problem one. I think the game, that shouldn't be a problem. If it's bought by its intended audience, fine. But there is a fair amount of hype around this game. It had amazing reviews on all kinds of places. That starts to be a problem when it starts getting into the hands of people who are not that experienced with storytelling. Some of them will take to it like duck's water. Some of it will try and go fall at the first fence. The other thing is actually the dice mechanic, because you always start at the first prompt, prompt number 1. You roll the d10 and the d6, and that gives you basically, it's almost a 1 in 3 chance of not going forward. You stay at prompt 1 for your second thing. And then the same again. There is a very strong chance that essentially the first time you play, you're going to work through the whole of prompt 1 and then go by default to prompt 2. So the second time you play, you're essentially getting the same experience. You're rerunning things. And this is not a story creation game. It is a meta story. The game itself, the game engine, creates a meta story. It is then on you to fill in the blanks of the story itself and to shape those to your particular character's own particular narrative. But at the same time, as Greg was saying, you're after that experience of the new. You want new stuff. You want the fresh feel. You're not looking for, I've been here before, I know what to do. You don't know what to do because you cannot do anything to influence what happens to your character next. You roll the d10 and the d6 and you go where they take you. It's a roll and move game.
It does have that sort of snakes and ladders feel now that you mention it.
Yes, I was very much reminded of that. It's, it has no board as such. In fact, we haven't mentioned the graphic design yet. And the graphic design of the first, 30 pages or so is extraordinary. It's just beautiful. It's a collage, a patchwork of pages put together from different sources. It feels like text pulled in from hither and yon, and it's not all from the same timeline. It's just beautiful. And then I mentioned I had a gripe. Then you hit the prompts, and the prompts fall into one of the cardinal errors of role-playing game layout, which is using a display font as a body font. Don't fucking do that. I've had Kickstarters come in, games I've been really excited about, opened the book and just gone, this is literally unreadable. I can read maybe 2 or 3 lines of this, at which point my eyes are just going, please no more. This is not one of the great offenders. It's a fairly readable pseudo black letter, pseudo Gothic style font. It's moderately readable, but there's about 60-70 pages of it. Please don't do that. Body text that is there to be read. The font should not be what you remember about it. Fonts are there to blend into the background. They're not there to be obtrusive. We are not at an era where we can reinvent the infamous music magazine Raygun, which was designed with deliberately unreadable layout. Look up Raygun on the internet. Raygun was a thing of beauty. I mean, the game is also mostly a thing of beauty. The graphic design is generally exemplary, but please do not use display fonts as body text fonts. I think I'm done with ranting now. That was my big rant. Sure. I spent a fair amount of time trying to source a physical copy of this. And it appears that there was not a single copy for sale anywhere in the United Kingdom, and I did not have time to order it from overseas. And I looked fairly hard around the UK, so I gave up and I ordered the PDF. And the first 30 pages, I was going, damn, I wish I'd held on for the physical copy. And then I hit the prompts. It's like, oh, no, actually, I'm good.
Ow. Ouch. Okay, well, now we know. That didn't bother me, but maybe I am just a Philistine.
Probably reading the screen of those prompts would be different than the pages. Yeah, I have the print version as well. So that it didn't jump out. I mean, it was noticeable, but it didn't detract from my gameplay experience. I would say though about the prompts, there is advice, and there's actually in the back a section of alternate prompts and sort of the advice that if you've played through a prompt previously, you can use a different one. So after you played the first time, you could pick 1B as your starting prompt or use one of the alternate prompts.
I house ruled it because I'm like, who's gonna stop me? Is Tim Hutchings gonna kick down the door waving a shotgun saying, drop the book, you pervert? No, I'm like, if I get a prompt I don't like, I'll re-roll. Boom. Hacked.
One thing that should be mentioned is that the prompts never reference anything specific in history or place. So this there's nothing stopping you from, like, even if you went through the exact same prompts, if you started your vampire in a radically different era, a different person, you would have a very different story, or at least significantly different. So that might be an interesting, record your prompts that you go through, but then pick a different thing. There's nothing stopping you from doing like a science fiction version of it. Start it in a cyberpunk setting and then just make up the history from there as it becomes a starfaring civilization, or a fantasy version, have it happen in any number. You can have it. That would be another way to, if you really like the first playthrough, don't use history, use whatever setting you think you could world build the most, because obviously with history you can just sort of Wikipedia things like I did, especially early on when I'm trying to, because it sort of recommends that like the first 6 to 8 prompts all take place in the first couple of years of your vampire's existence, but after that you do not have to like put a firm timeline like this prompt happens at this date.
Though I liked to do that. I could not keep track. I don't have a great grasp of history in my head, but that's okay. That's what Wikipedia and this historiography I've got hanging up on the door of my office. That's what those are for, so that I know what was happening at the same time. Yeah, one of the playthroughs, I'm like, oh, let's find out what was going on in India during the age of Tamerlane. And so that was interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I know I did a bit of, I had to do sort of impromptu research to figure out, all right, my inspiration for picking like a samurai who was in Mexico in 1615 is because that actually happened in history. There were thousands of Japanese who went abroad as mercenaries before Japan closed its borders, or as slaves. And so I thought that was an interesting sort of underutilized part of history. And but he wound up in England, and then
you'll
all over the place. Yeah,
you can go all over the place. It's great. Yeah. Well, have we moved on to how people play it? Because, my comment was on a word processor with Wikipedia open.
Well, a couple things about how it does what it does. We haven't talked about, like, characters are important because there's mortals and immortals.
Yes.
And you have to mention one immortal at a minimum, which is the immortal that makes you a vampire. And it doesn't say that has to be another vampire. For example, I decided I would make a demon. My character sold his soul for immortality, and this is what he got. But obviously, I think most people would be choosing some other vampire. And then there are mortal characters, and you make several to start with the person your character knew as a mortal. But what's interesting is that many of the prompts tell you all the mortals you know are dead. And otherwise the game also advises, if you've gone through enough prompts, just go ahead and move them all to dead, because they're all probably dead at this point from old age, if nothing else. So like when I ended the game, it's like, oh yeah, that Scotland Yard detective is probably dead. A long time ago. Yeah.
That guy who swore he would destroy me, he died of old age, and I forgot about him. It's the elevator scene from Mad Men. I never think about you at all because my brain is too full of other memories.
The characters are the kind of people you would use for callbacks if you can. I think it's the most 1,000-year vampire to have, like, I fell in love, and she's dead. Like, that was sort of like, for me, the highlight of my playing experience. It's like, oh, now I fell asleep in a cave for 100 years, and now I'm just a wild beast roaming the woods until I make contact with humanity again and get into trouble again. So
good times, man. Good times.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, my character's forgotten who he was at this point. And there's another thing is sometimes some of the prompts will ask you to not just erase memories, but like, you believe something that's not that you believe like, at least for me, I had a false memory. Like, and we haven't even talked about diaries at all.
Yes. So, I didn't play with the diaries much. They didn't do that. They didn't do it for me.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The example that you mentioned, the illustrated one that's coming out, makes extensive use of diaries, and the diaries become objects within the game and become plot devices. And again, I didn't play with diaries at all. I deliberately had a character who was deliberately illiterate because I thought that would be interesting. I wanted to see how not having diaries, not having that extra. Diaries are a way of essentially offloading. You back up your memories to a physical device that exists within the game, and then can be lost or can be destroyed or can resurface.
Yeah. You can only put 4 in experiences in a diary. So yeah,
it's
a nice mechanic, but I thought let's try it without that.
Well, and there's one that I got again in the Ermengarde game, where it's like you can cement one of your memories into legend in a physical form that will never be lost because it will become part of the culture, but you have to water it down. And so, mine initially, the real memory was, oh yeah, this librarian was cheating on his wife, and with me, this scummy, horrible vampire. And, I kind of manipulated them into fighting this other supernatural creatures. And so now it's like, oh, Guillaume, the faithful librarian at the Sorbonne, and his beautiful wife, Melisande, become entangled with a glamorous vampire. And once it's in the tapestry, that's how I actually remember it. I'm like, oh no, I didn't fuck those people over and murder them. I was their friend. So yeah, you can get these intense kind of ironies. And I don't know, certainly the game will prompt you towards them. But it probably came out because it was already in me, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a fun way to self-reflect, is you will see what it pulls out of you.
To go a little bit further, I think on like what a memory is, like we mentioned, there is a memory and each one has 3 experiences. An experience in the game is basically a sentence or a short sentence or two that describes one highlight of something your character has done. So it's never anything too elaborate. You never write anything like a full paragraph or a detailed thing, although there are sort of options. There is like that's what I was trying to think. The differences between long form and quick play. We all did quick play, which is doing this in a matter of a couple hours. But there is a longer version where you actually write full diary entries and basically make it into a novel. And
I'm with James. I wouldn't do that unless someone were paying me.
Yeah. And I think just as in the early 80s, there was a flood of fantasy novels that were clearly based on D&D campaigns, I think there's going to be a new wave of vampire fiction, whether it's self-published or, I think some of it's going to come out from, established publishers that are clearly based, for those who know, clearly based on thousand-year-old vampire campaigns. I think people will use this as a tool for writing novels. For creating the narrative that they will then adapt into a novel.
After playing one of these, my immediate thought was I could turn this into an absolutely smashing novel if I could live in Paris for a year doing the research.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah.
It would be so cool.
Sorry, it's not called long form, it's called journaling game, but yeah, it's writing a paragraph at a minimum for each question. And at the end you have something that resembles a novel. There's also a bit of advice, like on XXI 21, I guess. Answer prompts in a way that feels natural. Prompts will often combine to tell stories. And most importantly, I think, cede control to the game. So I think that's sort of an important... overthinking is unhelpful, be uncomfortable, and prompts are opportunities to learn about history and the real world. So I think the be uncomfortable... overthinking is unhelpful, and cede control of the game is like you want to lean into the fact your vampire is going to like have some bad shit happen to them. You're not going to want to keep things nice and neat for your vampire, even though that's your character. You want some blood and drama. So like, just like, oh yeah, no, I got maimed. My throat is a bloody ruin, like there's a lot. Yeah.
Whereas I took that in the opposite direction of your vampire is going to do terrible things. And, in the first game, it's like, okay, someone you knew in the past gives you a gift that will help you feed. And the way that things had worked out, I'm like, oh, clearly this is a plantation in the Caribbean. And I am just, taking the implied colonial habit of building my life out of the efforts of enslaved peoples. And, that's just literal now. This is just a literal vampire feasting on slaves. And eventually I'm like, okay, they're gonna have to revolt against this and find a way to kick my guy out. And it being 1,000-year-old vampire, things turn on you pretty predictably. And so, it's like, okay, he got his comeuppance. Good. I like the idea of these people driving him literally into the sea.
Yeah, that's actually, the other point. Not just have bad things happen to your vampire, but have your vampire do bad things. This is, like you said, a game about a person who takes and doesn't give it back. Like, that's the nature of vampires. That's what they need. Very important points. But yeah, so the game does give you a bit of advice on how to structure it, and there are options to play it in different ways, which is a great segue into how people play it, I think.
Like I said, I'm like doing my research. I'm like, okay, so let's push things forward 50 years. Let's pop open Wikipedia and see what was happening. At one point, I saw an entry in Wikipedia about people reporting an airship battle in Germany in like the 1300s or something. And I'm like, oh man, I kind of want to but no, it doesn't fit the narrative. He wouldn't be in Germany. The other way, when you said there were, two ways to play it, the two ways I saw to play it were different from the two ways you saw. I'm like, okay, one is come into this as the English major going, I want to tell a scenery-chewing monster feelings drama. Mm-hmm. Or the other way is to come in at it, more like an engineer. It's like, I want to optimize my outcomes and keep my resources and skills and find a way to keep to prolong the game by, it's the more traditional role-playing approach of I want to thrive and survive by killing things and taking their stuff. And it legitimately works, I think, either way. Mm-hmm. I think that if you play it as okay, I'm going to go for optimizing outcomes, a lot of what will happen is in the hands of the game, but still you can try to do that. And it will produce your emotional scenery chewing as a side effect. But that at the same time, even no matter how much of a big soppy emo you are, like me, you will still be like, okay, well, I got to decide on one of my resources to lose. Is it going to be this carved toy horse I had as a child? Or am I going to keep the plundered gold from the Delhi Caliphate? And I'm like, oh, I think goodbye, horse. Bye. Oh, no, we had a good time, but man, Daddy needs his emeralds.
So in how people play it, as I mentioned, the game at the beginning gives you like these two options, the quick play and the journaling game. But at the end, in one of the appendices, they talk about multiplayer. Even though this is a solo game, there are suggestions for group play. And you can do it either as a journaling game with a group or as a quick game over a few hours. So as a journaling game, it's epistolatory. So, you all write letters about what your vampire is doing. Everyone has their own vampire. And then the main thing is that you all stay on a similar timeline. So if somebody has to sleep for a century, everyone else writes two or three prompts to sort of catch up to the sleeping vampire. The idea being that, it's they will interact with each other, but it's not like an adventuring party where you're all together all the time. You're just like, oh, there's that guy. I hate him. I forgot why. Yeah. So, and then the quick game would be the larger. Yeah. So that would be the more interesting one where you're all doing it together, in the same room at the same time. So I guess everybody would be sort of a group writing session. So that's real interesting. I would like to try that at one point, at least the quick play version.
Sounds hard.
Yeah, it does sound hard. That sounds interesting. Yeah, it sounds like a challenge. I don't know if I will, but like, I don't know.
You need to have your giant history nerd involved, but at the same time not have your giant history nerd friend be bullying everybody.
Yeah.
Either that or you just agree that essentially what you're doing is world building. And with an underscore of your presence in the world as vampires may affect the history of the world, and it may turn out to be a different world to the one that you're living in.
Yeah. Well, there is a prompt where it's like, oh, yeah, you find an artifact that has the potential to change everything in the world. And if you get 3 deep into that particular prompt, it's like, you were fooling around with the artifact and you brought about the end of days. And I don't think that ends the game. I think it's like everything after this is just there's the gates of hell are opened and pestilence is visited upon the world. What are you doing?
There's the designer's notes at the end of the book. And one of the things I did, Tim Hutchings also mentioned several times in the interviews, is that his major inspiration for this was a comic called The Vampire by Ben Passmore. It was in a comic anthology. I tracked it down and bought it just so I could read it, because it was only like a couple bucks on the Kindle store. And
sweet.
It's only like a 6-page comic, but it's interesting, that this one brief comic had such an influence on Hutchings. But what it did is a vampire in the modern day who wakes up, goes to the convenience store. He's doing the same routine every night, basically trading mandrake roots that he knows how to harvest to the store for petty cash, buying something then to like impress someone, someone that he always calls Cassandra, and then luring them into an isolated place so he can feed on them. And he doesn't remember things, he forgets things, and it's interesting. You can tell that this guy is just I think Tim Hutchings called him a system of habits. All he knows is how to feed now. He doesn't remember anything else. He's a mess. And that was the biggest inspiration for this game, was this idea of a vampire just stuck in routine, a mix of terrifying and pathetic, with a beat up old beige computer in a shitty apartment. As described in the designer's notes. So, also he was influenced by Burning Wheel and a few other games. But I just like that idea of the vampire being this pitiable yet dangerous system of habits.
An automaton.
Yeah.
For why play that way, I have 3 answers to why people play this, and I'm going to go in opposite order of how I wrote them down, because I kind of went from most important to least. So the least important reason to play this is it's a great excuse to go down Wikipedia history holes. And, it was fun to find out about, okay, well, what was going on? I want to get into the deep roots of Islam's influence in India and Persia. Let's just dig on down there. So that's fun. It shows you your creative lazy bits. As I'm going through this, I'm like, oh man, I default to this particular kind of betrayal between characters. am I being lazy by just pulling out the most obvious trope that might turn up? And so it can show you unconsidered aspects of your own creative process, perhaps. And then finally, the primary reason that I liked this a lot is kind of a creativity calisthenic and idea generator. And as I was playing this, I'm like, this feels like the baby aspirin version of writing a novel. It's, it's the same kind of satisfaction. It's a fraction of the satisfaction, but it's a fraction of the work. It's all, and it doesn't have all the bad parts of writing a novel.
And in particular, the game does the work, does all the structuring work.
Yes.
You don't have to think about that. You don't have to. And what it creates at the end is not a novel. It's very much a role-playing style narrative. It has massive holes in it. It has loose ends. It's often not coherent. And the ending is generally interesting, but not necessarily satisfying in the way that a piece of fiction's ending would be. Not in all cases. There are cases where things come around beautifully and loops and callbacks work brilliantly. But you cannot guarantee that the game is going to do that. It is a really interesting story system. But I mentioned how influential it had been. And I think a lot of people would have had the instinct that I had playing through it, going, this is a really interesting system. I'm not 100% happy with the way it is working, and it is not creating necessarily the kind of stories I'm interested in. I can wonk this. I can take this. I can redesign it. I can do stuff with it and take it in different directions.
I don't know.
My first reaction was not to create new stories, but to create a new version of the game.
Oh, okay.
Not my reaction at all. I just succumbed to it completely. I'm like, yeah, let's go on a dark journey. Suck me under the black water, 1,000-year-old vampire. I'm into it.
Well, I think the other thing I learned from the game is that I'm not interested in vampires as protagonists. I never got into Vampire the Masquerade. I played through this and it's like I wasn't interested. I was analyzing the story and I was kind of into it. And I mentioned, my character only had one mark because I got to a point where 100-year gap, I went and had a pee, came back, realized I couldn't remember the number of the prompt I was at, and went, you're all right. Because I wasn't interested in the character, either as me being the character in a role-playing sense, or me observing what happened to the character in a traditional fiction sense. It didn't work for that. And I looked at it, and I don't think it's the fault of the game, it's the fault of the theme. It's vampires. Vampires are an enormously powerful archetype. I'm very happy to watch stories about vampires as long as they're getting staked by people I'm interested in. That for me is where vampires work as a narrative device. I'm in a minority here. I mean, one only has to look at, Vampire the Masquerade reshaped the role-playing industry 30 years ago. A lot of people do respond to that. Clearly, I mean, the success of this, which is not at the level of Vampire the Masquerade, but it's still, for an indie game, has been enormously successful. People do respond to that.
I did actually contact Hutchinson because my thought after playing this was, wow, how has this not been adapted for the Camarilla setting of Vampire the Masquerade? And basically his response was, oh, nobody asked me to do it and I don't want to do it. And I'm like, okay, fair. Maybe it only seems like an obvious your chocolate is stuck in my peanut butter situation to me.
I mean, I did enjoy the game as it is because for me, it made me think about the nature of memory itself, and it's rather illusionary control over or firmness of our memories, but also like the fact that as we go on in life, our circumstances change so radically that it seems so gradual to us, but yet if you look at it over time, think about where you were, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever, and you never thought you would be doing what you are now, or that the world would be like the way it is. and obviously it's exaggerated for the vampire character, but it's like, well, yeah, who you are right now is that who you are entirely? Or is that just part of who you are? I mean, how much is the past you versus the now you versus the future you? So
are you just the piece that happens to have persisted?
Exactly. And we have our own diaries. I mean, now, without computers, to remember calendar dates, for notes, and for taking photos. I mean, I take photos on my phone now just so I can, I have these apps that are like, oh, here's the photo you took a year ago today, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. It's like, oh, okay. Oh, wow, that was 3 years ago.
I take photos to remember where I parked my car.
Well, yeah. Well, if you get the right app, it'll tell you parked your car here a year ago today.
You parked your car here 100 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
It may still be there.
I had a. How were any of you guys fans of Milan Kundera?
Yeah,
I followed some of it.
Okay, because the thought that occurred to me is like, oh, this is like the Book of Laughter and Forgetting if you parked an S in front of laughter.
Yeah,
Very
that
good.
works.
Thank you. I'll be here all week.
And 100 years from now.
100 years from now, he was still making the same lame dad puns.
So the prompts are very well engineered to deliver, like, you make this character flawed who has to go through all these things, has to change so much and give up so much just to exist, only to meet some. None of the endings are probably happy on the best of circumstances. Yeah, I mean, it depends on your point of view, of course.
I don't know. I got one where it's like you attain some form of apotheosis and escape your condition and live forever in a superior form. How'd that happen?
Yeah.
I guess
that is possible, yeah.
But even the bad ones, you can make it cool. It's like, oh yeah, my vampire died after a communist vampire hunter derailed his train in Ohio and beheaded him with a sickle.
All right, that's pretty cool.
Curse you, comrade vampire hunter!
But James, I'm really curious. What would you reskin or redesign 1,000-Year-Old Vampire to be? So it sounds like not about vampires. It sounds like it'd be about something else.
I mean, I'm really interested in the idea of immortal characters. I've written stuff about immortal characters in the past. It's just the vampire stuff that and some of the logistics of it weren't clear. It was, well, every time I move and make a start, do I have to work out how my character is feeding? Do I have to? Because the game doesn't make that clear. If you go into this with a preset idea of what a vampire is, and you want to tell a story either in a particular style of vampire or about a particular vampire, the game, as the game itself says, you must cede control to the game and tell the kind of story it wants you to tell. You cannot go into this with a preconceived idea of what you want to do. In that way, it's much closer to something like a solo game book. And over here, the big ones were the fighting fantasy books rather than the choose your own adventures, and which were much closer to traditional role-playing games. Though, a footnote, there's a series of books over here called the Fabled Lands books. Again, solo game books created by two old friends, Dave Morris and Oliver Johnson. And each of those books represents a geographical area. And so you can walk west for a bit and then walk back east. And as you walk back into an area that you've already visited, it says, do you have the following keywords written down? And if you do, then it will not take you back to the previous paragraph. It will take you to a new version. If you have the word tinderbox written down, then, oh, do you remember that fire you lit? Well, it burnt the place to the ground, and here's the repercussions of that. But also, and this is not relevant to 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, but it is enormously good. If you walk west far enough, you walk out of the book that you're currently in, and it will go, your adventure continues in book 5. And you have to put book 5. So you've walked into the, from the east side of book 5. And so you walk around book 5, pick up objects, walk back into book 1 where you can use those objects to finish quests. It's brilliant. It's hugely mind-boggling. But that idea of, I was reminded of that by the multiple layers of the prompts, and I would have taken that further. I think certain of the prompts, that's a really interesting way. I talked about callbacks. Going down the levels of a prompt is essentially each one is a callback. And I felt just having 3 levels on a prompt and then, oh no, you just turn the page and go to the next prompt was a hugely missed opportunity. I would have gone, possibly you could go much deeper into the, things, situations recur, they get deeper, they become more involved. The whole thing about having loads of extra prompts at the end, I felt was a cop-out. I would have relayed out the whole book to incorporate those. As it was, it felt like, and again, the solo game book thing of kind of using the 5-finger bookmark to, no, but what if I want to go back to the bit where I get the choice about whether I fight the goblin or not? I would have restructured the whole thing. And I think I think a second edition of this would be really interesting because my guess is that Hutchings has learned an awful lot in the last couple of years about the way the game works. And there's an awful lot of clever design here. I think the way that the prompts are structured is really, really smart. And there's an awful lot of under-the-hood design going in there that may not be obvious to a casual observer just playing through it.
Right. Well, it's not hard to imagine how this could have been broken, where it's like, oh, if it doesn't take enough of your resources and doesn't take enough of your skills, it will drag on forever. But if it takes too many of your resources and too many of your skills, it'll end too soon. So it's clearly been balanced with some care.
Yeah.
Or else really good instincts.
Yeah. According to the interviews he did, he spent quite a bit of time writing and rewriting the prompts and sending it to playtesters in order to get the balance about right. But he did say he just decided eventually you have to abandon your work. All art is flawed. You can't. I could have spent another year on it, made it maybe fun. It wouldn't have been better. It just would have been different. So So there's that element to it as well.
I think for students of interactive narrative, it's really interesting because this is the first kind of solo role playing game like this that has struck big that I'm aware of, at least.
Yeah, it did start a new fad or trend, I would say. It's been around long enough, I think.
And yet at the same time, it has echoes. The thing that it reminded, I mentioned solo game books, but the game that it reminded me of more than anything else is Tales of the Arabian Nights. Eric Goldberg's seminal storytelling board game from the mid-80s, late 80s. I think it's 1986. I wouldn't swear to it. Which is a game that I played the West End edition of that to destruction. I loved it so much. But it has very much the same thing of it. You do something and you make what you think is an intelligent choice. And then it goes, no, you've encountered a djinn, and the djinn just, turns everything you want on your head. You do not get the responses you are either expecting or necessarily want. And again, the sense of things building, things progressing. The narrative progresses as you move further on and the encounters become more dangerous. And there are sometimes callbacks. But also the way it deals with skills or abilities is very similar in that you can pick up, the game will give you a skill. And not all of those skills are useful. Some of them are almost impediments. The one I always come back to is the status grief struck in Tales of the Arabian Night, which prevents you from doing certain things. But if you are in the same space as another player and you also have the skill storytelling, you can make them grief struck as well, telling them your story, and they become heartbroken by your tragedy. It's got that kind of that finesse and that nuance, and there are moments of that in 1,000-Year-Old Vampire as well. But the other thing I went back to is an insane book from, I think, the 1930s called Plotto. Have either of you guys ever encountered Plotto?
I've seen Plotto, but I can't remember where. It's one of the memories I've crossed out.
I have a copy. I've never made head nor tail of it. It's essentially a storytelling system crossed with the logarithmic tables from school that you guys are probably just too young to remember. I was at school just as pocket calculators were starting to come in, but were too expensive for everyone to have. So we used log tables for big advanced calculations, and they were just impenetrable things full of numbers and letters. And Plotto is very much like that, but you can use it to generate plots, and it's kind of bonkers. And sometimes the plots you generate are not the plots you were expecting or wanting at all. And it's a labor of kind of love and madness. But I think the love and madness in Thousand-Year-Old Vampire is on the part of the players, not necessarily the designer.
William Cook's Plotto, the master book of all plots?
I believe it may be. Published in, I want to say 1936, I have no idea. But republished about 10 years ago by, I want to say Running Dog Press, but that's almost certainly wrong as well.
Plotto is an algebra for stories that an author or storyteller can use to help create works of fiction. It is a collection of 1,462 generic plot conflicts that can be chained together into a master plot that forms the core plot structure for the story.
Yes, and it has this kind of this underlying engine beneath all of that. And again, I was reminded of some of what Plotto was I think, trying to do with what Thousand-Year-Old Vampire actually succeeds. Plotto tries to keep a very tight control over what it's doing. And I think actually what it should have done is, Plotto says cede control to the game, but actually what it's doing there is it's trusting the players. There's an awful lot of trust in the players to create the interesting story here. And I think where Plotto goes wrong, Thousand-Year-Old Vampire goes right.
Yeah, so all this this talk actually does remind me of sort of another trend in recent years, but sort of a larger thing. So, and basically what we're all talking about is trying to like form a narrative, a story out of essentially chaos or like randomization, the RNG. And, Thousand-Year-Old Vampire, you have the RNG through the dice rolling, so you don't know what order you're going to go through these prompts. And but like, I mean, what is sports but trying to find a narrative from chaos? Because on any given match, even the team favored to win can still lose, and you can never predict exactly how a sporting match any game will turn out. But like in games, there's this whole progression, especially in the last 10 years. Of roguelikes, which are games with heavily randomized elements in it. And one of them in particular is the one I'm thinking of is Dwarf Fortress.
Oh God, yes.
Entire Fantasy Worlds. Yeah. If you type in Dwarf Fortress Boat Murdered as one word, that's also an illustrated playthrough of a Dwarf Fortress colony, basically a settlement. And the person takes all like, the game has all these systems to predict like how characters act, how weather acts, how physics acts, but it's still randomized. There are certain randomized elements. And so the player puts in controls and then, and so normally it's not entirely deterministic. If you do the same thing in the game, it could still turn out differently because of the random element. And so Boat Murdered, which was one of the randomly generated place names in that particular game, became a colony that had doom because of, it's a whole story. You should look it up because, again, there's an illustrated comic that depicts the rise and fall of Boat Murdered, the Dwarven City. And so there's been this whole read. It is a great read. And it's just people want to have this urge to make sense out of chaos, and by having highly chaotic things or randomized things, and then the fun is in, or the sort of catharsis is in making sense of it, making a structure out of it. And Thousand-Year-Old Vampire is another thing. You're just a vampire. You're still a person, and you're still subject to the larger world around you. You may have powers and may be ageless, but guess what? You're still just a person. Like, things are going to happen. You're not going to be able to control them. And so it's not like a novel or a movie where one person had a vision, a story from beginning to end. It's making sense of chaos. So I think that's a sign of good art. I think of a great game, because it's 1,000-Year-Old Vampire has so much to say about multiple things, about memory, about life and death, and also about chaos and making sense out of it. So if that's not enough to get you to try to spend a couple hours to find out what happens to your vampire and what fate has in store for them, I don't know what will.
Yeah, it's a very specific way to fuck around and find out, but you will find out. And that's what is the fundamental human experience if not that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know I've been a bit down on it. I think the overall game is brilliant. It's just the fundamental thing is it's not for me, and that's because primarily of the style of character that the story is about. I think its systems are very clever. I would have done it differently. I would have designed it differently, but
of course you would.
That's my job. But there's a huge amount, not just to enjoy, but also to learn from in here. If you're a games designer or want to be, take this apart meticulously. Look at the way that the prompts interact with each other, the way they're structured. There's an awful lot of very intelligent design within this.
Yeah, Greg, any final thoughts on 1,000-Year-Old Vampire?
I was into it. This hit a lot of my points of interest, like it was laser guarded. Explorations of dark characters at their worst, huge, gross gothic feelings, and procedural generation. Yeah, I'm there.
Greg, you, the person who's worked on so much of the World of Darkness, would be interested in a game about vampires? Is this
crazy? I know, right? Yeah. Who would have thunk?
Yeah. Well, man, we finally got it. The listeners finally listened to you. So,
yep. I was rooting for this one from the jump.
And but before we go, of course, we want to thank our backers for the Kickstarter. I would like to thank Chris Cirilio, who I know in real life, who is a friend and supporter of RPPR, a good artist and fellow RPG podcaster. Thanks, Chris, for supporting this. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
And I'll give a thanks to CJ Gaver, who I unfortunately know nothing about. So I'm just going to say I hope you enjoyed this and that you do not become a howling beast feeding on blood, ravening for 1,000 years.
And it's my pleasure to thank Will Halliston, who's a very old friend. I'm really glad you're supporting the podcast. Many thanks for that, Will. I had dinner with Will and his wife a couple of weeks ago, in fact, at Dragon Meat. You should check out his fiction, which he writes under the name Johnny Nexus. His Emmy award-nominated novel Game Night, which is a hoot and a half. It's delightful. I published it briefly through Magnum Opus Press. At the start, Will now publishes it himself. Do not think of it any less for being self-published. We all do that in the RPG world. We all self-publish, that is, not think less of people who do. But seriously, Will, many thanks.
And we'll talk to you all next time.
Yep.
Thanks for listening. Bye.